It's D-backs versus Padres, so you know what that means. It's crossover time with Locked On Padres host Javier Reyes.
You are Locked On Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Miller Thomas, multimedia journalist and a graphic designer. So please go check out my website, millerthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there, you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedonmlb and use code all lowercase LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Now, without further ado, let's bring on the man of the hour to break down D-backs versus Padres, NL Contenders, and where are the NL All-Stars? We got Javier Reyes of Locked On Padres on the pod. Poo, 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 poo. How you doing,
What's up, man? Thrilled to be here as always with you. Our just timeless crossovers. You know what I mean? It's like, you know how like Always Sunny in Philadelphia has been going on forever? That's our crossovers. That's what it feels like. It's just reliable. It's consistent. And we're always doing it. And I'm super excited on this one because frankly, I think there's genuinely a lot to talk about. I know that we've done a lot of episodes in the past that are like, hey, who's the player that is least liked? You know what I mean? Like in the offseason stuff. But I feel like there's been plenty with both of our teams. So I'm ready to dive into it.
Yeah, another thing that's consistent is the listeners. Thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks and Locked On Padres your first listen every day. Please continue to subscribe and share. We're on all your streaming platforms. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Locked On Diamondbacks, Locked On Padres. Now, Javi, we got ourselves a rematch, series number 2 on the year, D-backs versus Padres. Padres took the first series on the year. They won 2 out of 3 games. I believe they scored 24 runs to the D-backs 13 in that series. But as we stand here, June 6th, as we're recording this, 1:14 p.m., I feel like there's a lot of parallels between our two teams, Javi. I feel like a lot of the stars in both of our lineups have not played up to snuff this year. I feel like you look at the rotation for both of our teams, a lot of injuries for both of our squads. How do you feel the Padres are stacking up against the D-backs at this point of the year? And how do you feel about your team overall?
Whew, I mean, there's so much, man. But I think you're right. At the base is that just a lot of underperforming stars for both of these teams. I will say that as of late, so if that's relevant to this current series, that both Manny Machado and Fernando Tatis Jr. have been heating up recently. Unfortunately, the latter of those two, Machado, just got an injury in the last game of a sweep to the Angels. It looked like just running out to first base, like a thigh sort of issue. We'll have to see if we get any update on that. Hopefully it's not long term. But Tatis has been heating up a little bit. But I think that this team, while it's better in so many areas, I think the way I'd describe the Padres, the like Cliff Notes summary would be they are so much better in a lot of areas. Hitting with runners in scoring position was the biggest thing last year. Their starting pitching has been a little bit shaky, but they still have guys like Cease and as of late, a Michael King, a Matt Waldron doing well. You've got Jeraxon, as you once called him, Jeraxon Profar being a genuine all-star type of player this year, which is, I don't think literally anybody saw that coming. Jake Cronenworth has been a lot better this year after being a little bit of a question mark, especially after the extension he signed. So you have all that going for you. But then they find a way to not just be not like less below average in other areas, but some of the worst in the league in other areas. And that's, I think, explains why they've been so inconsistent. They come off a series when they beat the Royals, plus 80 run differential team, 35-23 heading into that series. They take 2 of 3. How do they follow that up? By getting swept to the Los Angeles Angels, making guys like Patrick Sandoval look like the second coming of Randy Johnson. And here's what happens. I think the reason the Padres have been so consistent is 2 major areas in terms of on-field play. Certainly, there's got to be something with the organization as a whole, but on-field play, they are extremely bad against lefties this year. I think they're the 8th worst in baseball, basically, if you go by kind of the main offensive indicators, while they're the best in baseball or the second best against righties. So it's that, and then they are also significantly worse hitting at home. So what every given day, one of those things, or at least most, like every now and then, every other series, something like that's going to happen. Either they're facing a lefty or they're at home. And I think that's what explains part of this. It certainly explains the last series in which they got killed by the Angels. They faced two lefties in that series, so that's why they got beat. And then you say, oh, when they beat the Dodgers, they beat the Dodgers, and then famously they got swept by the Rockies. Or I think it was they beat, I'm trying to remember. Yes, they beat the Dodgers pretty, like, statement wise, pretty well, and then they get swept by the Rockies. Guess what happened there? Wasn't necessarily lefties. They were at home, and for some reason they can't play at home. So it just feels like one way or another they lose all their goodwill, all that's going for them, all the strong things that I just addressed, by being dreadful in other areas to render any improvements you make kind of inert. 2 steps forward, 3 steps backward type of thing.
You kind of sound like me on my podcast, because everything you say is basically everything I say about the D-backs over the last few weeks. Because, the D-backs a couple of weeks ago, you have a big series win over the LA Dodgers. You take 2 out of 3. Feels like you're starting to finally come alive again. Then you lose to the Detroit Tigers. And then you lose to the worst team in the National League, and the Miami Marlins right after that. And it feels like you're just right back where you started, in the bottom or near the bottom of the division. And for the D-backs, it feels like a lot of the problems that the Padres have are also affecting the D-backs. We have a bunch of injuries in our rotation. You will only see one lefty in this upcoming series, Blake Walston, in the finale, a rookie, because the D-backs have been down Erod, Merrill Kelly. Now they're down Zach Gallen. Like, they have taken it hard in their rotation so far this year. But to be honest, that hasn't been their biggest problem. Their biggest problem has been their offense all year. It's the fact that the reigning rookie of the year, top 5 MVP finalist, Corbin Carroll, has been, according to WRC Plus, like one of the 3 worst players in Major League Baseball this year. Like, he has been dreadful offensively. Lourdes Gurriel has done nothing offensively. And then we thought third base was going to be upgraded this year. Statue Evan Longoria last year. Eugenio Suarez has not been much better than Longo was last year. So a lot of the offensive pieces that the D-backs came into the season relying on have not produced. The rotation has been hurt. The bullpen has been shaky. But over the last week, the last 6 games, D-backs, at least 9 hits in every game. I think they have at least 4 to 5 runs in 5 of those 6 games. So the offense feels like it's starting to turn around a little bit. Feels like it's starting to get a little bit better. But I still think we're pretty far away from saying, all right, D-backs offense is officially back. Like, what would it take for you to feel like, all right, the Padres, I finally feel like the season's turning around. I feel like we're moving in the right direction. Like, how large of a sample size do you need to see of your team playing good baseball?
A really big one. And while you just mentioned that the Padres won't face a lefty until the last game of the series, well, the other issue is at hand, which is that they're playing at home. And for some reason, they can't hit at home. So you see what I'm saying? Like, one of those 2 situations arises usually. And I think that's why, sort of a pun, by the way, Luis Ariza. I don't know. So that's the issue. So while, great, we're not facing lefty. Unfortunately, though, you're playing at home. So it's tough, man. And I think for the Padres this year, it's been guys like Xander Bogaerts, who is now injured, obviously, but just for the first month of the season, just dreadful. Manny Machado has been dreadful until he started picking up recently and then got hurt. I think that's been the issue with this overall. And I mean, don't get me wrong, the Padres have had some disappointments, but man, the Corbin Carroll thing, you've got Eugenio Suarez, who they brought in this offseason to kind of help out. You've got Gabriel Moreno, genuinely shocking me. I mean, I think he's a good defensive catcher at the minimum, so that's good. Better than what the Padres are dealing with. But Lourdes Gurriel, Alec Thomas, guys like that, just, why is the most consistent player on a team that just made the World Series seemingly Jock Peterson? I know Ketel Marte's been a better player, but as a bat, it seems like Jock Peterson has really just been there fully. So it's just, both of our teams have a lot of that. And Christian Walker, one of the most underrated players of the sport, but it's, like you said, very similar. There's some good developments that are completely negated by the bad developments. And I think that what sucks is the Padres' good developments were what we were hoping for. You know what I mean? We were hoping that Jake Cronenworth would bounce back. We were hoping that Dylan Cease would be better than last year. We were hoping that Matt Waldron and Yu Darvish would stay healthy and be a pretty effective guy. And, you get some of that. Jake Cronenworth, you Jerickson Profar, can he do anything? Jackson Merrill, can he just be better than Grisham? You get all that, but it's like, too bad. You guys can't hit lefties. And by the way, the most frustrating thing about that lefty thing is the players that are struggling against lefties this year, with the exception of Luis Arraez, historically are better against lefties than righties, which is like, it's like you're finding new ways to lose. You know what I mean? Like they're just inventing new ways to lose. It's like imagine if Tatis just never hit for power ever again. You know what I mean? Like that's what it feels like. It's like what the heck? Like imagine Barry Bonds in year 8 was just like, I'm actually a stolen base only guy now. It's like what? Well, like it's just super frustrating for this to happen.
And at least with AJ Preller, you're always going to feel like, all right, if my team's struggling, he's going to make a move. I mean, he wasted no time to pull the trigger on the Luis Arraez deal, and he's been phenomenal so far for you guys. I mean, just looking at Baseball Reference, I mean, a 381 batting average. I mean, that's what he does, right? Bat around 400 every single season. Like he'll probably lead the league in batting average again. He is a contact machine. Want to talk to you about some of the NL contenders who are liking after, we're about 60 plus games in. It's like a 2020 season sample size. So we'll talk about some contenders and pretenders in segment number 2. Hey, Locked On listeners. A lot of life is unpredictable, but a good life insurance plan gives your family a financial safety net to protect against some of the unknown. Policy Genius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It makes choosing the right policy for your family easy and quick. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options are 100% online and let you avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policy Genius helps you easily compare your options from America's top insurers in just a few clicks. Their award-winning agents can even walk you through the process step by step. Your work life insurance policy may not offer enough protection for your family's needs. Even worse, it may not come with you if you leave your job. Policy Genius has no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can trust their guidance. Get peace of mind by finding the right life insurance with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com. All right. Let's get back into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast crossover with the Locked On Padres and, of course, host Javier Reyes. Javi, I want to talk about NL Contenders and Pretenders because we are, a little bit over 60 games of the season. We got about 2020 sample size. And, of course, if you go back and look at some years after 60 games, there are teams who, after 60, wouldn't be in the postseason who then, the second half of the year, make it to the playoffs, get hot, and even, make it to the World Series. We saw that with the Nationals a few years ago when they won the World Series. If you just took it after 60 games, they were a non-playoff team, and then they go on to win the World Series. So this sample size is not an end-all, be-all, but as you currently look at the standings, it kind of is shaking up how we kind of predicted, at least from the division leaders. You got the Dodgers in the NL West, you got the Brewers in the Central, and then the East. Maybe that's a little bit surprising because the Phillies are running away with the NL East right now. 8 games up on the Braves. What has surprised you most from the contenders, and which team do you feel like is the strongest if you just had to pick one, 60 plus games into the season?
So first, just in terms of what's most surprising, I think I'm a little bit surprised that the Cardinals are still
bad. Yeah.
Just a little bit. I think that, yes, while this is a team that, and I make fun of all the time, that like it took them like 10 years before they finally realized you should probably start spending money on pitching for once, which I swear they haven't. There's a reason why Adam Wainwright was literally their ace for like 4 years past his prime. I mean, he was a good pitcher, but kind of insane that you were counting on that guy to take you all the way when there was plenty of free agent guys available at times. So you bring in Sonny Gray, but he starts off the season a little bit hurt, but he's been really good so far. I'm just a little bit surprised that Arenado and Goldschmidt, mainly Goldschmidt. Yeah. I'm just a little bit surprised about them. I thought they'd be a little bit better than this. The Brewers, believe it or not, doesn't surprise me at all because the Brewers are masters of the regular season and they will never go to the World Series ever. They won't even make it past the first round. But unfortunately, again, not to get on my soapbox, but that's a team that has had so many years when they had a free route to the playoffs to win that division, and they were like, we're not doing anything. So that stinks. I think that the Braves being good, but so many of their offensive players underperforming. Obviously, Ronald Acuna is hurt now, but even when he wasn't hurt, he was having a really bad follow up to his MVP season. Michael Harris, Matt Olson, slightly getting better. Ozzie Albies. They have so many guys in that lineup that, Orlando Arcia, who made waves in the playoffs last year for being a crybaby, all that sort of stuff. A little bit surprised that their players are performing that well, which, by the way, should tell Padres fans something because, look, their stars aren't doing good either, but they still manage a positive record. It's an organizational thing, guys.
Except for one guy. They got like one MVP in that lineup. Marcell Ozuna is having like a monster year for some reason.
It's ridiculous. But
he's back.
In terms of who's a contender, I honestly think that right now it's Philly, Atlanta, LA. Like, I know that's chalk, but I don't think the Brewers are contenders. I think the Brewers, on top of the fact that they're fake and that when they make the playoffs, we've seen, as we saw with your team last year, cool. Guess what, guys? Your little Adrian Hausers and your pitchers and your Willie Adames, they will do well when you're facing Miles Michaelis. What are you going to do when you're facing Zach Gallen and, Tyler Glasnow? Nothing. And that's why they lose every year. So I don't think they're a true contender. And on top of that, I think they're probably going to sell at the deadline. I think that's still something that they're probably going to do. They already traded their best player or one of their best players before the season to Baltimore. So I think it's those. I think it's chalk, but hey, and also, no, I don't care that the Phillies haven't played a lot of teams above 500. As we've just discussed, that does not matter. Our teams have beaten plenty of good teams, but then lose to bad teams. So that stuff does not matter.
And the other thing is there's not a lot of 500 teams in the NL when you look at it. It's like 4 teams.
It's like, I think it's the 4 that I just mentioned. And the only other one that's close is Chicago, the Cubs. Everyone else, because the Cubs are neutral, they're 500 right now. Otherwise, it's just Dodgers, Brewers, Braves, and Phillies, the only above 500 teams. It's been a kind of a wasteland in the National League.
And that's what we're kind of like talking about in segment number 3. But like the National League has kind of sucked this year. Like there's a lot of parity. Like the D-backs have not been where we wanted them to be. The Padres and Giants, they've been right around where the D-backs are, middling. You look at the Central, like all those teams are around 500. Like the Reds, I think, have taken a little bit of a step back, but like a team like the Pirates, like you're probably pretty impressed where they are right now. Paul Skeens already looks like one of the best pitchers in baseball. Jared Jones is emerging. Like if you're a Pirates fan, you feel good with your record, that the fact that you're 4 games below 500. I look at the Atlanta Braves. I mean, Chris Sale having a renaissance season. I mean, that's insane. If you're the Boston Red Sox, you're like, we just wasted the last 4 years of Chris Sale. He was hurt every year. He gave us nothing. Then as soon as we trade him, he looks like a Cy Young contender again. I feel bad for Red Sox fans there. The Phillies, I mean, Ranger Suarez. You don't? I feel a little bad because I'm borderline Red Sox fan. The Phillies, Ranger Suarez, he's coming out. He's looking like a Cy Young contender. Trey Turner, he's hurt right now, but he's having a bounce back year as well. It is just straight chalk right now. There are some teams that could be dark horse teams. Like maybe the Pirates can heat up because of their starting pitching. Maybe Ella De La Cruz, and when that rest of the lineup gets healthy with the Matt McClains, maybe the Reds could take off and sneak into the wild card. But right now, it feels like no one is really stealing a wild card spot or like, taking advantage of the fact that the National League is so vulnerable right now. I just don't know why it seems like numbers offensively across the board, why it feels like there's not a lot of strong contenders. It feels like now, like the American League has probably generally been better than the National League over the last few years, but right now it feels more prominent than probably the last few years.
Yeah, and I think that, while it has been chalk so far, I think the only question is going to be the Central. I think that's one of the things that happens is like we notice every year, there's always one team that really elevates themselves in the second half. There's always at least one. I think last year was it the Mariners last year? I forgot who exactly it was last year, but there's the D-backs, frankly, were one of those teams too. And I'm not just talking about the playoffs. They elevated themselves. So that could happen. I think it would be the NL Central. I think all 4 of those teams are still interesting. I don't want to write off any of them as contenders. At least teams that might make some noise in the postseason. I still think the Cubs could. Cardinals still have some good veterans on that team. And they're also the Cardinals, Pirates, Reds. It's too close because, again, I think the Brewers will fall off, and I think that they could trade out. I think that's going to happen. So we'll see what goes down. But, yeah, man, the offense is down the board. There's been a lot of disappointing players this year, it feels like. It feels like a year where there's a lot of stars that were expected to be better, from Machado, from not even Corbin Carroll, but, like, Fernando Tatis Jr., Xander Bogaerts. You've got guys on the Marlins who regressed mightily. You've got guys on the Mets who have been super disappointing this year. A team that was arguably even more disappointing than the Padres last year was the New York Mets. And basically everybody there has been a mess still. So it just feels like the story this year has been how bad everyone is versus how good everyone is, which is unfortunate because the Dodgers are good, but have they given you like world beaters like vibe? No. Not really. They feel beatable. Very good. Don't get me wrong. This isn't Dodger slander. And same thing for the Braves. The Phillies, as I will tell you, I've been to a couple of Philly games with one of my best friends. He's a diehard Philly fan. He's got season tickets. So we went to a couple. That place is, there's something to that team. There's something to that team more than just stats. And don't get me wrong, they have, you mentioned Ranger Suarez, right? Like he's been great. They've also cleaned up their defense a lot, getting some new center field, left field help, not forcing the Castellanos and Schwarber to be something they have to do every day. They just beat the crap out of you. And when you're at a game, it's amazing. Like the vibe is really immaculate. So I guess we'll have to see how the rest of it plays out, man. But it says a lot that both of us are kind of resigned to the idea of our teams being confident that they're going to get better.
Yeah, and it feels like the Phillies probably have the best fan base going right now in baseball. When you enter that playoff environment in Philadelphia, get ready to leave with a couple bruises and maybe a black eye because those Phillies fans are a little rough out there. Like Javier was talking about, the players this year not playing as well. Not a lot of them are living up to the standards that they set for themselves, and that's what we'll talk about in segment number 3, the week NL All-Star Field. But hey, if you want to win some money on America's #1 fantasy sports app, then you have to use Prize Picks because Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 5 million members. It is the most fun and exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You pick more or less on 2 or more player stats for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. With Prize Picks, you can turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite sports this summer. You can make Prize Picks lineups in as little as 60 seconds. You just need to pick 2 or more stats on 2 to 6 player projections, and you're locked in. There's always action on Prize Picks, and this is the perfect time to try out something new as basketball is winding down. Make sure to try out esports this month because for every Wednesday and Saturday in June, if your lineup doesn't win, you'll get your entry fee back. Choose from Counter-Strike 2, Call of Duty, League of Legends, and more. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right, back here on the Locked On Diamondbacks, the Locked On Padres crossover. And like Javi was alluding to, numbers this season for a lot of star players are just downright not good. And it is most prominent when you fill out that MLB All-Star ballot. I encourage everyone who's listening to this podcast, go fill out a ballot for yourself because when you go through position by position, there's not more than 2 or 3 guys that you feel like is even deserving to be on the ballot. Of course, every team has to send a representative, so every team has a player on the ballot at every position, but there's probably only 2 or 3 guys at every position who even feels all-star worthy. And I want to know why that is, Javi. Do you feel like because we had this big referendum a few years ago in Major League Baseball, oh, it's become 3 true outcomes, the balls are juice, offense is way too crazy, we got to scale it back, now we got the deadening of balls, now it feels like we swung too far in the other pendulum? I love all the new rules, but the baseballs seemingly being deadened and offense being down, I'm not a fan of that. Can we have the new rules with the juice balls? Because then I think we have a perfect balance of games moving quickly, a lot of offense, great pace, and that is the kind of baseball that I want to see.
It's a good point because like with the juiced balls, yeah, in theory that makes games longer with the more offense, but like you said, we have the new pitch clock rules and you know, it furthering all these other different rules to make the game more expedient, I think. And there's something I think you're onto something. And I think that the true outcome thing, whether people choose to admit it or not, I go back and forth where I think part of it is just preference. If your thing is like, I love the like almost like soccer, where your thing is, it's not that you're scoring every few seconds, but when you do, it is a thrill and fun. Or are you someone that loves seeing more balls being put in play? I do think that it comes preference. So there are some days when I'm like, well, that stinks. This is a boring team to watch. They're either hitting home runs or they're completely silent the next day. So I go back and forth on that, but I think juiced balls. I do think the injuries, this is always a part of it. I think it says a lot that there have been so many starting pitchers that have been hurt this year, and not to get into the whole like bad faith argument that the pitch clock is the reason guys are getting hurt all of a sudden. It's just clearly not. I think that I think it's a dead end ball. You know what I mean? And I think there's been this inconsistency with why do we keep going from juiced ball to semi-juiced ball to back to why doesn't it feel like they MLB officials are like, all right, okay, we'll juice the balls this year. Like, it's very, very weird. And I think it's really unfortunate that the sport is like this, but it's also possible, Millard, that it's just an anomaly, right? Like, this is just an aberration, similar to, I don't know if you remember, I think it was 2 seasons ago when we had like 4 no-hitters in a month. Do you remember that? So everyone was panicking, and then guess what? It wasn't a regular occurrence. Like, that was just a weird like anomaly that kind of happened. So I don't know. I go back and forth between it, but I'll tell you one thing. I'd like if our teams could hit more. That I'm cool with. Everybody else can have the dead end balls, but I'd like if our superstar teams that actually try and spend and invest and make moves can score just a little bit more every now and then. That'd be nice.
And honestly, it's so funny. I'm looking at like the year by year runs per game by the NL. 2020, it was like 4.7. That's when we're talking about the juice balls. Then you go to 2021, it goes down to like 4.3. Then you look at 2022, numbers are back. We got the new rules, and offense is up to like 4.68. Then you get to 2023, it's down again. Now it's down this year. It's like every other year it goes up and down. Yeah. And I wonder if that's Major League Baseball affecting it. I wonder if it's injuries. Like, there's so many different variables. I don't know if you could point to just one thing that affects the offense, but yeah, we would like to see both of our teams do better, because for some reason it feels like the stars in Major League Baseball have really struggled. And it is most pronounced when you look at the MLB All-Star ballot, because Javi, I know we were talking about it a little bit off air, but you go look at the NL outfield, Jurickson Profar. I said that right.
Yes, you did. Yeah.
He is like running away with the leading spot in the NL outfield. Like, he's played every game. He's got the numbers. Yelich is probably number 2. And then after that, like, you think every team has at least 3 outfielders on the ballot. It's tough to find a third outfielder right now that should be on the NL All-Star team. Like, you have to like make the numbers dance a little bit. Like, it's so wide open. I'm like, you know what? If Jake McCarthy gets hot here for a month, he might be worthy of the third All-Star. Like, honestly, like, it could honestly be anyone in Major League Baseball. And I don't feel the same way when I think about the American League, because then it's like, all right, Soto and Judge, that's already 2. Then it's like, I got to find my third. But I feel like there's a lot more identifiable stars and MVP candidates right now in the American League. When you think of the Bobby Witts, and you think of the Sotos and the Judges, the Jose Ramirez's, the Devers, like, there's so many different players that are going off at different positions. In the National League, it's like, every great player I think of is like on the LA Dodgers, or it's like, if I think of another great player, they're actually having a terrible season. So it's like,
that's what happens to me. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, who can you even identify with right now in the National League and consider them a star with how they're playing?
I mean, dude, Jason Hayward's hitting better than Michael Harris. You know what I mean? Like, there's Lourdes Gurriel is almost the same thing as Nick Gordon. You know what I mean? Like, it's just been such a Nolan Jones, the big breakout from last year for the Rockies, is just non-existent. And I feel bad. And shouts to our preseason crossover when I flex some trepidation around that, and then he just has not come through. That preseason crossover was hilarious, by the way. I recommend everyone go look at that, because it is aged very interestingly. But you're right. And I think Tatis still has a really good chance, because he has been heating up and he hasn't been bad. And I remember people have put up like, wins above replacement graphs. The fact that Tatis is still up there and he's having a down season so far kind of shows like the bad Tatis is still a good baseball player. And I think that if you're a glass half full type of person, which I'm currently not, I usually am, but currently I'm not. That's how much the team's driving me nuts. That's one thing for that team. But yeah, you're right, man. The National, I mean, even there's probably some other positions too, frankly. Is shortstop okay? Because I know Lindor is just, he ain't getting that this year. You know what I mean? And then you've got, Trey Turner, but he didn't play enough, right? Like, he's barely played enough. You've got Dansby Swanson, who's been really underperforming. Is it going to be Ezekiel Tovar? Literally, maybe. I think it'll probably go to like Mookie Betts, and then
Yeah,
Elliot
it'll
De La
probably be
Cruz,
Mookie.
frankly.
Yeah.
But like, you're right, man. There's just so many guys. Like, would I vote for Nick Castellanos purely for the vibes? Maybe. I might do that. I might do that. Like, there's some vibes guys on here, but I wish that the vibes could be also supplanted and helped with good baseball play. It just feels like there's been so many disappointing players this year, and that the best players are not the ones that you would think of. You know, like, which we've talked a lot about, right? Like, it's just, what if baseball's bad?
It might be bad.
What if baseball's bad?
One more stat before we go today. 15 players right now have at least an 800 OPS in the National League. Last year, it was 28 guys. So, like, about half the 800 OPS guys has fallen off in just 1 year. Still a lot of sample size. Still a lot of games left to increase the sample size. Like, I still think a guy like Tatis, who's like, he's like right out. He's like the first guy on the outside of that 800 club at like 790 or something. Like, I think he's going to be fine by season's ends. I think there'll be a couple other players that heat up. But offense is bad. Offense is down. When we watch our teams, we feel like it's probably just our teams that have been sucking so much, but it's across the whole National League right now. So maybe it's something that we should keep our chins up on and say, you know what, we're all going through this together. It seems like offense is down in Major League Baseball, and we just don't know why. Hopefully the D-backs take care of business against the San Diego Padres. Javi, do you want to, just for the fun of it, give a prediction?
I'm going to say that the Padres bounce back and they win the series because that's what they've shown that they do all year. They love getting swept and then they tease you. And then what will happen next, Millard, if they beat the D-backs this weekend, and I know the D-backs haven't been good this year, but even still, if they beat them this weekend and then they lose their series against the A's, I don't know what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to leave it at.
Okay, there we go. He doesn't know what he's going to do. I'm taking a series split. I say D-backs win the Brandon Pfaadt start, and they win.
It's 4.
Yeah, 4-game series.
You know what? I really think that actually narratively it would go along with everything we said. So yeah, it would make sense that both of these teams come out of it with basically no gain or no loss. So I'm with you on the split for once. Yeah, for sure.
I'll take the Pfaadt win, and I'll take the Blake Walston win, the lefty in the finale. I'll say that.
And also, is he new? Is Blake Walston new?
Oh,
then no doubt in my mind. Yeah, D-backs got that one. No doubt in my mind. D-backs
start of the season. Yeah, he's ready. We love lefties making starts against the Padres.
A guy made his major league debut and no hit the Padres. That is one of the least discussed points of slandering this team that no one brings up. We got no hit by a guy at his debut, and he wasn't even a top. He's not Paul Skeens. You know what I mean? He's not Garrett Crochet. He wasn't even a top prospect. I think it was like Ryan Nelson. Was it that him? I always forget.
Tyler Gilbert is currently in the Phillies minor league system. I didn't even know where he was. I looked it up just now.
Hey, good for him though. Good for him though. He owns the Padres.
No hitter on the resume. Great stuff by Tyler Gilbert. That's it from our little crossover. Locked On Diamondbacks, Locked On Padres. Javi, where can the listeners find you online?
You can find me at Javapeno, at JAVIIPENO, where I just tweet dumb memes about the Padres, but people seem to like them every now and then. Check out my work at Just Baseball. I also have another podcast called Baseball versus the World, which is about evergreen fun stuff. And frankly, the only thing getting me through the season right now, in terms of baseball, getting me through baseball season it's fun to just talk about random stuff. So go check that out. And yeah, it's basically it, man. Basically it.
Locked On Diamondbacks, wherever you stream podcast. Locked On Diamondbacks on YouTube. Locked On Padres on YouTube. We'll see who takes down the other. D-backs versus Padres another weekend, and hopefully we wake up Monday morning. D-backs, the owner of that second wild card spot. Doses.